Good afternoon, everyone. We are now in Jeremiah chapter 10. And Jeremiah chapter 10 starts a new chapter as God speaks to Jeremiah. And now Jeremiah is speaking, right? And Jeremiah is speaking to the house of Israel. Now, understand the house of Israel being the northern seems to be also scattered around. They're no longer a kingdom. There's no more king in the northern kingdom. And so maybe calling them the northern kingdom may not be such a correct terminology, but you know what I mean, that the house of Israel really refers to the one from the north. The southern is called the house of Judah. Now understand in chapter 3 of Jeremiah that God it was really upset with the house of Israel, gave them a certificate of separation, but then appealed to them to return. God is demonstrating that one, he is just, and he needs to punish whenever there are people who are not, well, I guess, who are violating, right? Who are violating his trust. But more importantly, is that God is loving, and he still treats the house of Israel and the house of Judah both as like a wife, basically. And in so doing, the disciplining has to be really tough. So we have read how difficult things will be and how bad things were yesterday in chapter 9. Now in chapter 10, Jeremiah now speaks to them to say, "Hear the word which the Lord speaks to you, O house of Israel." Now understand the word here is shamar. Shamar really tells us to listen to what God says. The word means the matter, right? Listen to what God has to say about all these things. And it is something very vocal, I guess, because Jeremiah is saying something and they have to hear. But the idea of hearing in this case is to listen and to think through, to understand, and then to do something about it, to respond to what God has to say. This would be the same word that you as parents will tell your children, uh, have you not heard what I say? Pick up your toy. So the idea here is not for the child to keep playing computer games and ignoring everything you have said. Although technically speaking, they are correct. They have heard, like picking up the sounds. But whether they understood it and whether they're going to do something about it, the answer is no. So the children of Israel, the house of Israel and the house of Judah are similar to our naughty kids, right? They hear, and the Chinese say, it comes in one ear and goes out the other ear. So Jeremiah is appealing to them to listen and do something. Thus says the Lord. And important to them is, do not learn the way of the nations. By the way, the word Gentiles here is goyim. Do not learn the way. And the word learn here is from the word lamad, right? And interestingly, the word limad would be to teach. And so you have to first learn before you can teach. And this is one of the really interesting words in Hebrew. And so do not be dismayed. The idea here, dismayed, is terrified. Do not be terrified with the signs of the skies. Why? because the nations are terrified by them, right? Terrified. The goyim, right? Now, this is an important element that we have to understand. The pagans, the nations worship idols, and they don't know the true and living God. When things happen in the sky, when there is an eclipse, the God is angry. When there is a volcano eruption, the God is angry. When there's thunder and lightning, the gods are angry. So they are afraid of all these, what we call signs of heaven. And so and thus says the Lord, they are not, right here, not to learn these ways. Why? Because they never learned this when they were with Moses. They never learned this from the Torah. So they say, for the customs of the nations, verse 3, Goyim. The customs here would be the hukah, the regulations. In the Torah, the same word is translated as statutes. And so the customs, the practices, the framework of the Goyim, and you notice the word Goyim, these are Goyim. It's translated as Gentiles here and peoples here. It's the same word, same word. Are futile. The word futile here is an interesting word. That's havel. It's usually translated as vain, futile, useless. And this would be a correct translation, futile, useless. But the word havel is actually the name given to the brother of Cain. In Genesis chapter 4, he is called Abel. Havel, Abel. But in the case of Abel, he is not useless. It means brief, as a vapor that is breathed into the air, and soon enough it's gone. And so the profile of Abel came and went very quickly. The book of Ecclesiastes talks about vanity of vanities, same word. But in the context, Ecclesiastes does not mean futile. It means brief, right? Now, why is this called futile or useless? For one cuts a tree from the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with an axe. So they chop down a tree. Notice A and B. Chop tree. Why is chopping tree so much a focus? And the reason is very simple. They go and decorate it with silver and gold, precious things, and fasten it with nails and hammers. And so these are the decorations, the decor, and this is to make it upright with the tree. So just look at the narrative so that it will not fall down. They are upright like a palm tree. And the whole idea here is they get a tree, right? And what they do is they chop down the tree. And after they chop down the tree, they fasten it to the ground and they bring it back from the forest and they leave it at home and they decorate this tree. Verse 5 describes this in a bit of detail. They stand up like a palm tree, but they cannot speak, meaning they can't say anything. They don't say anything. Basically, dumb. They must be carried. They have to be lifted here and there because they cannot go by themselves. They are immobile. And so God says, thus says the Lord, do not be afraid of them. Do not fear them. They cannot do evil. Now understand, evil, the word evil here is ra, and that would be what is not agreeable. Something that's bad, right? They can't do anything, really. They can't do anything bad against you. But at the same time, they cannot do anything good. And the word here is tov. And this would be agreeable. What do we understand from this is quite clear. It says here, they make trees as idols, who are dumb, who cannot do anything, cannot do things, whether good or bad. And that is the picture that's given. So you should not learn from them. And look at what Jeremiah says. Inasmuch there is no one like you, O Lord. You are great. The word great is gadol. And your name, notice the word name is Shem, is great in strength. Might is strength. So what is Jeremiah trying to say? And so what we have now is a contrast. We have a dumb and cannot do anything idol, who looks like trees that they chop down from the forest. They decorate it. They carry them. They cannot move by themselves. So don't be afraid of them. They can't do anything. But with God, Jehovah, He is great. He has strength. He has might. And the idea here, He can do things. And great things too. He has a character. He is real. And all these are words that actually describes God. Who would not fear you, O King of the nations? Jehovah is the King of Goyim. That's what Jeremiah is saying. You are the King of nations, Goyim, for this is your rightful due. Rightful due means this is fitting. So when he thinks of God, the King of all nations, Melech HaGoyim, is what is right for God to be called. Among all the wise of the nations and in all their kingdoms, there is none like you. So God is Jeremiah is saying God is incomparable. And this is an incredible insight that Jeremiah is now giving to us. So the contrast of here and here is like quite the opposite. One is dumb and cannot do anything, and God is great, has a character, has strength to do things, and people will fear him, and he's called the King of the nations. None of the idols are called that, and that is befitting to him. That there, among all the wise of every nation, in all their kingdoms, there is none like you, second to none. So this is a declaration of the greatness of God, that no matter where you go, you will never find a God like Jehovah. And that shows us how intimate Jeremiah knows God. And this should resonate with us today. Who are they? But they are altogether dull-hearted and foolish. Dull-hearted literally means they try to be stupid, right? They are not listening, they are too stubborn, and they are foolish. So this is an A and a B. A wooden idol is worthless doctrine. Now, what in the world is this? A wooden idol, a tree itself, right? Has no, what you call, has worthless discipline. The idea is this: an idol cannot do anything, much less cannot discipline. And now God is now referring back to what's happening. God is scolding them, God is warning them, God is telling them the impending danger coming from the north. And so the contrast here is all of these people are stupid and foolish. How can a wooden idol discipline? It's of no use. You can beat the silver into plates. Now, number 9 is plates. The word plates here is rakah. And in this case, it is flat. And this would be used for plating. Flat piece. And so we find this word in Genesis chapter 1. The rakia. They are plates. Very thin, right? And it's brought from Tarshish. Now we think Tarshish, some people think that it is Spain or Cyprus. Some would think that it's as far as the British Isles. Go from Ufas. Ufas is a place famous for gold. I really don't know where it is. The work of the craftsmen in the hands of metalsmith, blue, purple are their clothing. They're all the work of skillful men. And so all of these talks about a decoration of the idols. Now we have found and we have seen even in today, lots of statues being made, gold-plated, silver-plated, and that is what God is saying. Jeremiah is telling them, thus says the Lord. All of these brought from all over the place, and you think that this is an incredible sight, but they are wooden idols. You can't do much with them. But the Lord is the true God. And in this word, true, trustworthy. God can be trusted. He is the living God, Elohim Hayim, right? Living God, the everlasting King, Melech Olam. These are names, right? At his wrath, the earth will quake. It's like an earthquake, shudder, tremble. The nations, and the word nations here would be Goyim, will not be able to endure his indignation. Now, the word indignation here would be anger. So who can stand up to God? And so he is the, notice, living God, everlasting King. So it's King forever, King for a long time. But living God is important because it has to do with the name of God. He is the Ahia, Asher, Ahia. And that means, that would be, I am always in existence. I am always alive. I was and is to come. And that would be Jehovah, the living God. And that is how Jeremiah understands God. Then it says, thus you shall say to them. So God is speaking to Jeremiah, says, the gods have not made the Shamaim and the Haaretz shall perish from the Eretz, right? And if you look at verse 11, this is what it says. The gods have not made heavens and the earth. And this would be in Genesis 1:1. The heaven and the earth. And what is going to happen is, it says that shall not perish, right? The gods have not made the heaven and the earth. And they, the gods, shall perish from the earth and from under these heavens. What does that mean? It means this: the Hashamaim and then the land is Haaretz. And Jeremiah is told by God, this and this is not made by them. It is made by Jehovah, the living God. And these gods of the wood will perish. It will decay. It will go away. And by extension, God has made the earth by his power. He has established the world by his wisdom. Why his wisdom? How it was made is wisdom. This is Genesis chapter 1 and 2. He has stretched out the heavens at his discretion. Now, this is important. Stretched out the heavens means the sky is expanding. And science have since seen this, right? And he utters his voice, the multitude of waters in the heavens. There's a multitude of waters in the heavens. The idea here is at the sound of God's voice. And so all these things are made by God's speech. He said it, and the skies gave out, the waters gave out, the land gave out, and that's what God is to Jeremiah. He causes the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth. He makes lightning for the rain and brings wind out of his treasuries. The word treasuries here would be a storehouse. Right? And this picture here is that if you talk about waters or rain, wind, lightning, vapor, all of these is made by God. And so this is a declaration of who God is. There is none like him. So nobody else can claim this. Verse 14. Everyone is dull-hearted, is stupid, right? And it says, without knowledge, every metalsmith will be put to shame by an image. His molded image is false. It's a lie. There is no breath in them. The word breath is ruach. There's no wind. Now you need to understand this. This is about idols not alive. The living nephesh would be the birds in the sky, the birds that fly, the birds on the animals on the land, and the animals in the sea. And then in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, when God breathed into the nostrils of Adam, he became a living being. And so man has a breath in them. But all these molded images and metal, so you need to understand, the idols are of two kinds, wood and metal. So it could be molded, it could be things could be done to it, or it could be chipped down like wood, but there is no breath. They are not alive. They are futile. The idea here again is havel. They are useless, a work of errors. And the word here is not errors. The word here is delusions, right? Delusions. Error as in they're mistaken, not they have done wrong. It's like delusions, and it would be a mockery to God. In the time of their punishment, they will be destroyed. The portion of Jacob is not like them. The portion of Jacob is now described as God's name. The portion of Jacob in verse 16, the Helek. The Helek would be the well, I guess portion is good, right? Portion or the part of Jacob, which is ultimately very special, is not like them, the idols. He is the maker of all. Israel is the tribe of his inheritance. The Lord of hosts is his name. So when you see Israel, you can know that God is real, because Israel has moved around in the world and yet has come back. And God is always pointing to Israel as his clock. The Lord of hosts is his name. Be careful that God will destroy. Verse 17. Now in verse 17, it says, gather up your wares from the land, O inhabitants of the fortress, for thus says the Lord. All of you people who are still out there, get ready, listen to what God says. Behold, I will throw out at this time the inhabitants of the land and will distress them that they may find it so. He says, at this time of judgment, God will throw them out. And here it says, gather up your wares. Throw and gather. That's an A and A prime, right? It is the opposite. So there is no need to gather up your wares, because God's going to throw all of them out. All the inhabitants will be thrown out. And so in verse 18, they will be distressed, pressed, that they may find it so. Jeremiah now says, Hoy is me, for my hurt, my wound is severe. But I say, truly, this is an infirmity, and I must bear it. That is a reaction from Jeremiah when he hears all these things. Yesterday, I mentioned to you, Jeremiah really feels for his people. He says, my tent is plundered, all my cords are broken, my children have gone from me, they are no more, and no one to pitch my tent anymore or set up my curtains. And so he doesn't seem to have a wife to do that, and everything is going upside down. He says, for the shepherds have become dull-hearted. Now, shepherds in this case, in verse 21, are people who would guide their sheep to pastures. So must have something to talk about, something to teach, something to lead. But it says here that they have become stupid. All of a sudden, they think that all these things can be done, but it's stupid. They have not sought the Lord, therefore they shall not prosper. All their flock shall be scattered. The word sought is inquire or to seek. Seek the Lord that he may be found, right? To seek the Lord. The second word, prosper. Prosper means sakal. It is to consider, right? Consider. They have not sought, they have not considered, therefore they shall not be considered. That God is not going to listen to them, God is going to ignore them, and all their flocks, which means that every animal that they are taking care to pasture land, they will be dispersed. Now, this is a very interesting explanation because God is telling them, the time will come that all of these will be meaningless because you'll be taken away. Behold, the noise of the report has come, the great commotion of the north country to make the cities of Judah desolate, a den of jackals. So, north country, that will be Babylon. And the noise of report has come that Babylon has come from the north, and the north will be Dan. The house of Israel will be the first for them to hit. Until later, they will hit the cities of Judah. O Lord, I know the way of a man is not in himself. It is not in man who walks to direct his own steps. This is something we need to unpack. Verse 23 says, I know the way of humans, of Adam, humanity, is not in himself. It is not in man who walks to direct his own steps, as in marching. It tells Jeremiah now that he says, when I look around me, I see these people, I know that humanity is not in himself. It is not in man to do what he wants. But, O Lord, correct me, but with justice. Correct me properly, not in your anger, lest you bring me to nothing. The anger of God, when it comes, you get zapped. But it says, pour your fury on the nations, on the Goyim, who do not know you, and on the families who do not call your name. They have eaten up Jacob, devoured him, consumed him, made his dwelling place desolate. Now understand this, they have eaten up Jacob. That's the new word, the standard word. Eat, devour is eat, consume is eat. And made his dwelling place a desolate place where nobody is coming back again. So your fury, O Lord, who do not know you, that's the Gentiles, and may it be on the families who do not call your name, because this family is calling your name. If my people who are called by my name. And where does it come from? The book of Jeremiah. So this is a build up towards those encouraging words. And Jeremiah is facing all this from all sides. And he looks at it and he speaks his mind and asks God. And this will be the conclusion of chapter 10.